Good morning. We're on Joshua chapter 23, studying lesson 12 from the book. We're glad that you're here. Before we start, I'd ask Blake to lead us in prayer. So can you please us in prayer? We'll start.
Father in heaven, we give you thanks for the day, for the blessings of it. We give you thanks for the time and place that we have as your children to come together to listen to some things in your word being taught. We ask that things that we learn this morning will make application in our lives. And we ask for the teacher of this hour that he will remember the things that he has taught and presented to us in a way that is easily understood by all of us. Father, we ask that in a little while as we come together to worship, our thoughts and our hearts will be centered on the reason why we're here. The sacrifice of your Son and our Savior, Jesus. We ask that we'll always remember him and tell about him to people as we have opportunity. And it's all these things in your Son's name.
Seth would like to clear up something about last class.
I just wanted real quick to talk about this. So last week we talked about the altar that the 2.5 tribes in the west built on their way home. And the pictures I showed and what we talked about kind of led us down the path that was made out of stones and set up. But it does say it was a replica. So this is what an artist's depiction of what the tabernacle altar probably looked like. It was made out of wood, acacia wood, and it was covered in bronze, which is completely different than being built out of a lot of stones. So I just wanted to clarify that so everybody can have that in their mind whenever they study that in the future. And this is probably more what it was like.
So in Joshua chapter 23, we see that this is one of Joshua's farewell addresses. And before we start the lesson, we'd like to sing a song, which I hope will convey the message, or one of the messages that Joshua was trying to give. I asked Brian to lead us in the song, Hero Israel.
Hero Israel, the Lord thy God is one God, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all of thy heart, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all of thy soul. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all of thy strength, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all of thy heart.
So, going to the first question, when did the speech in chapter 23 take place? So according to the timeline that we have in the book, the conquest of Canaan started around 1406 BC, and 7 years later, that would have been 1399 BC. How much time has passed since? So according to this chart, it would have been towards the end of chapters 23 and 24. Where Joshua would have given this address. So it would have been about 8 years according to this chart. But there's also other opinions out there that though the dating for the conquest and the end of conquest remain the same, at 1406 and 1399 BC, according to Joshua's age, which some authors suggest that he was born in 1486, and we know that he died when he was 110 years old. That would make Joshua about 85 years at the end of the conquest, and give us about 24 years of rest that God gives. And we see that in verse 1, that after a long time afterward, when the Lord had given rest to Israel from all of their surrounding enemies, and Joshua was old and well advanced in years. So either way, it is a long time after the end of the conquest in 1399, so whether it's 18 or 24 years, it's just left to speculation at this point. So going forward, who did Joshua call to speak to him?
All of Israel?
All of Israel. Seems interesting here that Joshua probably around Syria and Shechem, and he summons Israel to come to him. And we see in verse 2 that Joshua summoned all Israel, its elders and its heads, judges and officers, and said to them, I am now old and well advanced in years. So it is something that Joshua wanted to do probably as part of his farewell address. We don't know if the next chapter is also at the same instance. That is, we'll leave that for Cal to clear that up for us. But this is one of Joshua's farewell addresses. Moving on to question number 3. Why did Joshua give credit to the Lord for the defeat of the enemies of Israel? Why do you think Joshua gave credit to the Lord?
Well, he says in verse 3, he says, because of you. So I think that's saying, and then it follows it up by saying, you know, that God fought for you. So God obviously cared for them.
Yeah, certainly. We've seen many instances from the time they crossed the Jordan. We see in Jericho where God miraculously made the walls fall. We see in Ai that God did not want all people to go to Ai, just a few, about 30,000 to go and fight, because God didn't want to make it clear that there's I who is fighting for you. And he made their battle plans, he gave them instructions on how to go and proceed about conquering these cities. And so certainly apt for Joshua to give God the credit. We also see in Joshua 10, when Joshua had killed the kings of the Amorites, the 5 kings of the Amorites. Verses 13 and 14 we see, and the sun stood still. That is Joshua chapter 10, verses 13 and 14. And the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, until the nation took vengeance on their enemies. Is it not written in the book of Joshua, the sun stopped in the middle of heaven, and did not hurry to set for about a whole day? There has been no day like it, before or since, when the Lord heeded the voice of man, and the Lord fought for Israel. It clearly does say that the Lord fought for Israel, and it is very apt for Joshua to give credit to the Lord. Any more comments? You think why this is important to give God the credit?
Well, it's interesting that he's the commander, and he's the one that's led the forces. And rather than giving the credit to himself on the commander, or to give credit to the people, the armed forces, he said, we really know who is the one that deserves the credit, and that's God. And that rightly so.
Yeah, exactly. Any more comments on this? So we see, moving forward, in question number 4, what promise did the Lord make concerning the remaining nations? We see that in Joshua chapter 23, verses 4 and 5. What promise did God make regarding the nations?
He's already given them to them, he's gonna drive them out and give it on.
Exactly. We see that, in verses 3 and 5, 3 to 5, it says, and have you seen, and you have seen all the Lord your God has done to all these nations for your sake. For it is the Lord your God who has fought for you. And then verses 4 on, behold, I have allotted to you as an inheritance for you, your tribes, those nations that remain, along with all the nations that I have already cut off from the Jordan to the great sea in the west. The Lord your God will push them back before you and drive them out of your sight, and you shall possess their land, just as the Lord your God promised you. So I wanted to show you a map here. the dark region, if you can see, all of these dark regions up here are the lands that Israel had conquered from the Canaanites. This portion beyond this red line to the east, the west, you see all the lands that Joshua is talking about here that they hadn't conquered quite yet. And you see the reason for that in Deuteronomy chapter 7 and 22. Deuteronomy chapter 7 and 22. And God had promised that the Lord your God would clear away these nations before you, little by little. You may not make it into them at once, lest the wild beasts grow too numerous for you. So at this point, say after 7 years, if the population of Israel was about 2 million or so, if they would have increased any, maybe say 2.5 million, it's a large estimate, but still, this whole land over here is too vast for them to conquer it and to yield it to themselves by themselves. And so God, by His divine providence, knows at what time to give them, as He has promised. And this is actually, God says back in Joshua 13 in verses 2 to 7, we see that which nations these are that are still not occupied. And God promises and asks Joshua to allot this as an inheritance to the 9.5 tribes of Manasseh. So we have the 2.5 tribes of Manasseh here, and the 9.5 tribes to the west. And this land is supposed to be given as an inheritance to the 9.5 tribes of Joshua. Any other comments or observations that you have? So question number 5, what attitude and action was necessary for Israel?
To be courageous.
Exactly.
And also said to do all of the law.
Right. These are 2 commands Joshua gives to the people. In verse 6 he says, therefore be very strong to keep and do all that is written in this book of the law of Moses, turning aside from it neither to the right hand nor to the left. So where else? The 2 commands are to fear God, be strong, to fear not, to be strong and obey God's command. Where else was the same encouragement given to them earlier in the book?
Chapter 1, verse 7.
Exactly. Let's go to chapter 1 and verse 7 and read this. So after Moses, God commissions Joshua, and this is God speaking to Joshua, and he talks to them, to Joshua, and says in verse 6, be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land that I swore to give to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, being careful to do according to all the law that Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand nor to the left, that you may have good success wherever you go. So it's important that for us to understand that God had given this instruction to Joshua, and here Joshua is taking the time to make sure in what is one of his favorite addresses to convey this message from God to them, to make sure that they stay strong, even though there are these nations that have not been conquered. He's asking them to be strong, know where your power comes from, for God is the one who's going to do this to you. Any other comments and observations why it is important, Joshua?
Well, God tells Joshua the same thing in chapter 8, verse 1, right before they conquer Ai. He tells them, do not fear, be dismayed. And then also in chapter 10, verse 25, Joshua's telling the people here, do not fear, be dismayed, be strong and courageous, for thus the Lord will do to all your enemies whom with you fight.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a theme that's repeated throughout the book.
Yeah, exactly. And we've been singing about it. The battle belongs to the Lord. God is telling you, the battle belongs to the battle belongs to the Lord. You don't have to fear. It is God who is fighting for you. And it is important that Joshua. It was important enough to Joshua to convey this message to all of Israel before he departs. Any other comments on this part? Yes, sir.
You know, Joshua, some of these things he's saying, he can say these things from his faith is, he would have come out of Egypt. He's seen the heroics of God from the standpoint of saving them through the Red Sea. And then before they took, you know, he saw all the complaining and murmuring, within the times when they complained not having food, when they were wandering in the wilderness, and then being able to carry these people into battle with the Lord, win, then lose when there was sin, and those type things. And so he's seen a gamut of things. Brethren today who are, some of our older brethren have seen very, not as dramatic, but coming through the Depression, the wars of World War I, things like that. You know, there's a lot to glean. Those people could glean from him. We probably still have some brethren we could glean from today, those who have stood that with good faith.
Yeah, good comments. Imagine, you know, if you had come out from Egypt, and basically everyone else you have come out with, except one man, is dead. It was 40 years. So the faith it took for Joshua to keep on believing in God, though he sees all these people dying around him, for the faith he kept for all these years, is very important for us to learn from. And it is important, as Brother made a comment, that it is important for the older generation to convey this message of faith and pass it on to the future generations. Yes, sir. Moving on to question B. List two scriptures in the New Testament where Christians are encouraged to have the same attitude and action. We kind of touched upon this a little bit about passing on the faith, but where else in the New Testament do we see the same instruction for Christians to have the same attitude and action? For one, we see in John chapter 14 and verse 27, where Jesus says, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives to you, do I give you. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid." So it is this whole, you know, the theme, another theme we see in the New Testament is not to fear.
We've been reading through Acts and into Paul's, the trials that he undergoes. In chapter 26 of Acts, in verse 6, I guess he's standing here in front of Agrippa, and he says, "And now I stand, and am judged for the hope of the promise made by God to our fathers." Then he goes through and he describes what those promises were. But he says, "I stand." He took a stand for the Lord, just like Joshua did.
Yes. And we are also encouraged to do the same. We see in 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verse 13. So that we be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, and be strong. So that is something we are to do in this day and age. We see so many things changing, evolving around us. A lot of people falling away from the faith, people departing from doing what is right, but yet it is for us to be watchful, stand firm in the faith, and be strong and take a stand. As Brother Alfred said. So any other comments, any other verses that you see?
A little bit different take is regarding the keep, do all what is written in the book of the law. I've got Colossians 3:17. And whatever you do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks through him to God the Father.
Exactly. Another thing is not only to stand firm, but it is also required of us to keep the commandments. Being strong in our faith also requires our obedience to the commands of God. So just like in the Old Testament, it was required for them to stand firm and not be afraid and keep God's commandments. It is the same thing is required of us in this day and age. Any other comments or objections, sir?
Another one is in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 10. It says, "Finally be strong in the Lord, and in the strength of his might, put on the full armor of God, that you may be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil." And then goes on to explain the different pieces of armor. So that's kind of being strong in the spiritual fight, similar to Joshua's physical.
Exactly. And God doesn't leave us with a, not only is he instructing us to be strong and obey his commandment, but he's also, if you read on in Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 10, going further, he gives us the tools that we need in order to stay strong and follow God's commands. So God did not leave us helpless here, but he has given his word in all these things that we require for us to stay firm and stand in the truth. So,
I was thinking of 1 John 4, where it says, "Do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God." And then toward the end of that passage, it talks about greater is he who is in you than he who is in the world. And perfect love casts out fear.
yes. And the fear, though it doesn't talk about this senseless fear, fearing about the retribution, but this is a fear that God is mixed with love, that we know who God is, we know his power and what he's done for us, and it's not the fearing of retribution kind of fear, to be exact, but this fear of his awesomeness, how awesome God is the kind of fear that we're supposed to have toward God. Any other comments before we move on?
In thinking about how they had that faith and inheritance of promises, Colossians 3:23, beginning, "Whatever you do, do your work heartily as for the Lord rather than for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance. It is the Lord Christ whom you serve."
Very apt verses. Moving forward to question number 6. What warning was given to Israel about the nations that remain in the land? What warning was given to Israel about the nations that remain in the land? You see that in Joshua chapter 20, verses 7 and 8.
They weren't to mix with the nations or marry or worship their gods.
Exactly. And it's not only that God said that we must not mix with these nations, but you must not even mention the name of their gods, or swear by them or serve them or bow down to them. It is very important instruction that God had given them throughout, the ages, and also that Joshua continues to give to them. We read in 7 and 8 that you will not mix with these nations remaining among you, or make mention of their names or their gods, or swear by them or serve them or bow down to them, but you should cling to the Lord your God, just as you have done to this day. So Joshua commends them for clinging to the Lord to this day, and it's important, back in India, we know a lot of the Hindu gods, and so we know their names. I know most of the names of their gods, so if this command applied to us, we should not even bring those names to our lips. That's how seriously God thinks about these things, and these idols, and how guarded he is about us. Why do you think, what is the reason? And what do you see? Do you see any applications to us? These are similar to the instructions that God gives to them in Exodus 23, verse 33. Quickly, Exodus 23, verse 33. He says, "They shall not dwell in your lands, lest they make you sin against you, or if you serve their gods, it will surely be a snare to you." And we see this repeated again when in Deuteronomy 7, after the giving of the law the second time, in other places. Why do you think this is so important to God?
Well, he's the only God, so it's offensive to him to even act like there's others.
Yes,
Also, I think of it as being like a familiarity, just like if we watch a lot of movies with cursing, it starts getting normal and okay. And if they're talking about the gods all the time, it might be like, yeah, that's a lame god and everything, but you're getting that in your mind of it's something that exists just by talking about it. So I wonder if that applies today, like, when we're around things, that God would rather us, watch what we watch. Because then it just makes it familiar to you.
That's very good. I mean, those things can grow on you easily. And it, what might seem offensive now, if you keep, doing it, might seem normal to you after a little while. And so God, made sure that He instructed Joshua and Moses and to them all through the wilderness, and Joshua is taking this opportunity to make this command them that they should not mix with other nations. Any other comments? Yes, Jeremy.
I think if you put the two together, like where he says, or where it says, don't mention their name and hold fast to the Lord, it's kind of like he's saying, don't waste your time. Like don't fill up any time with speaking about them when you can be holding fast to the Lord and what He's asked you to do. Don't worry about those other people and what they're doing, and just don't even engage it, because it's just not worth your time. When you could be spending it over here with me.
Yeah. Exactly. One more comment there.
Same principle for us in 1 Corinthians 15:33, be not deceived, that company corrupts good morals.
And these are lessons, not only do they apply to them, but in each of these points, there is something that we can learn as Christians in this day and age that, of course, we might not mention the name of God, but there are other things that people do that are not right in the sight of God, and that if things like those become a common occurrence in the day and age, we should not, look at it and see it as if it is okay, but, make sure that we separate ourselves from the practices of this world. Any other comments before we move on?
I just think just in decorating and stuff, there's sometimes that, like, Madison likes the Indian or whatever type boho, I don't know, the stuff that she likes. And we decorated her room, and it's really cute. And then sometimes I'll be looking for posters or something, and you'll see the God that you may know with the arms and stuff like that. And I just think of it as, oh, this is just something that looks like that culture or whatever. But I don't ever go by it, because I think, but it's really not. It's bringing a false God into my house. So I try to stay away from, people decorate with Buddhas and different things like that. And you think absolutely nothing about it. You're not thinking of that as a God, but you actually are bringing a false God into your house. So I try to kind of watch and look at what I'm bringing into the house, because sometimes you do it and you're totally innocent, you don't know. But if somebody that is from that culture comes in, that means something to them, So I don't know if God goes, oh, Anita, you picked that and you didn't know it was a God or something. I don't think He would do that. But I try to look and try to find out what I am actually bringing into the house, because you tend to, even like when the people were decorating a lot with the African stuff, and there was this one certain statue that people were buying a lot, and it was like a fertility statue and stuff. And to us, it just looked like a cool statue, but it was actually a god, So I try to kind of just watch that on innocently bringing in something that somebody else actually worships.
It's a good point that you mentioned. It's not only what God sees and what we see in it, but it's also if someone comes in and looks at this, someone of a different faith, they might think that, well, this person,
Right.
it's okay for them to have this, and it's a wrong impression that we give them.
Or even if they don't have the faith, sometimes these people that just know it, and they'll go, oh, you have this such and such God in here, the fertility God or something, and you're like, oh, well, I didn't know that, but I mean, it's just one of those things, and I think we think of it as very innocent, and we may be innocent in it, but it's something we really need to look at and watch.
And something that God takes very seriously. All right, moving forward, in question number 7, how strong was a man from Israel because of the strength of God? One man puts 1,000 to flight, since it's the God who fights. We talked about this, that God fights on behalf of these people. So one person killing 1,000 person, putting them to flight is a sight to behold. We don't know what that looks like, but boy, that would be something to look at. And it is something. It's not the first time that is mentioned here that we see that God promises them that if you keep my commandments, this is how strong you're going to be. We see that the Song of Moses, before Moses passes from this world in Deuteronomy 32 and 30, we see that Moses mentioning the same sentiment. And so it is not something new, but it is by the power of God that these people are strengthened, that they can fight and drive out all these nations. Imagine how many people were there all through this land, and just a few people just drove them around and made nothing of them. So it's truly God working on behalf of them. Moving on to question number 8. So what attitude toward God was necessary for Israel? Joshua 23, verse 11. It says, "Be very careful, therefore, to love the Lord your God." So a lot of people perceive the God of the Old Testament as someone requiring this kind of mechanical obedience toward him to all these commands. That you shall do this, you shall do this, you shall do this, you shall not do this, not do this, not do this. And so a lot of people look at it and say, he just required mechanical obedience. These people were just afraid of him because of all that he had done. But that is not so. We see just in this command that God requires love for him. It is not just blind obedience, but an obedience that stems from love. So God requires, they needed to have this attitude of love toward them. And we see in Deuteronomy chapter 6 and verse 5, it says, "And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and all thy might," like we sang in the song, "and all thy strength." That is something that God requires of them, and as our Creator, as their Creator, that is something God wanted from them, as their love and devotion toward Him. Any comments? Why do you think God required this of them?
He's always required it. He is a jealous God. He requires it of us today.
We see also in Deuteronomy 30, Deuteronomy 30 verses 16 through 20, when Moses finally he makes his farewell speech, he asks them to love God, walk in His ways, to keep His commandments, and choose life. That is something that is very important. We choose life by loving God and obeying His commandments. That is something He has explicitly stated and requires both of them. And also, moving on to question number 8, list 2 scriptures in the New Testament where Christians are encouraged to have the same attitude.
Mark 12. Mark 12, 28 through 33, Jesus says, "Hear, O Israel," and what we just sang.
It's very interesting to see Jesus, after all these years, in the New Testament affirming everything that is written in the Old Testament, thereby giving His approval of the message from the Old Testament by mentioning many of these commands. When someone asks Him one of the greatest commandments, He says, "You shall love God with all your heart and love your neighbor." And so we see a repetition of these commands in the New Testament.
Second John chapter, or there's only one chapter. 2 John verse 6. He says, "This is love, that we walk according to His commandments." Very similar idea, the connection between the attitude and action.
Also, we see in John 14, verse 15, that if you love me, you will keep my commandments. Again, the same similar idea. And the reason we love Him, we see in 1 John 4 and 19, is we love Him because He first loved us. And it's not God asking something of us that He didn't do first Himself. He loved us so much that He gave His Son for us. And there is something He has done for us, and He expects the same in return. Any other comments before we move on? Moving on to question number 9. So if Israel compromised on their love for God, what would be their consequences? See that in verses 12 and 13. We'll read these 2 verses, verses 12 and 13. So after speaking to them about all these, until now, Joshua says, "For if you turn back and cling to the remnant of these nations remaining among you, and make marriages with them, so that you associate with them, and they with you, know for certain that the Lord your God will no longer drive out these nations before you, but they shall be a snare and a trap for you, a whip on your sides and thorn in your eyes, until you perish from off this good ground that the Lord your God has given you." Again, explicitly, he mentions that these are the things that will happen to you. They'll become a snare and trap to them. Not only back then, but we can see that now, people who choose to marry who are not Christians, how much of a struggle it is then for them to continue to live a faithful life. My father, back in India, he is, as a part of, this whole thing of arranged marriages, so if anything, any dispute happens between husband and wife, the whole family and the elders, they get them together and, counsel them. And we've seen so many instances, where people have chosen to marry someone who's not a Christian and all the troubles that they face. It is true back then, it is the same thing now. That'll be a snare to you, a thorn in your side, that is something that we need to be careful of. And Joshua had mentioned to them, and it applies to us in this day and age. Any other comments? Moving on to question number 10. So this is an interesting thought. So how did Joshua express the fact that he was about to die?
It was the way of the earth.
It says, "Now I'm about to go the way of the earth." How is it an appropriate way to express one's death?
That's where we're all headed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He almost mentions it in passing, sort of. He doesn't make much of it. He says, I'm about to go the way of the earth. He knows, he almost has a calm attitude towards it. He doesn't express any fear, doesn't seem to be worried by it. We see similar words expressed by David before he dies, and he's talking to Solomon. He says, "I'm about to go the way of the earth." And so we see an almost, no fear kind of attitude, that they know where they're going, or this is where everyone is headed. Especially with Joshua, seeing so many people die, he knows where they're all headed. And so we know that, that is a result of sin. Now, as Christians, we know that it's something that everyone has to go through. And a lot of people in the Old Testament didn't have this, but now we know that, because of our Lord, we have hope. After that, we know what happens. He's given us much more better picture of what happens after that. And so we have this hope beyond what comes out after that. Any other comments you see? How Joshua looked at this, or how appropriate it was expressed?
If anything, he had to have more faith, because this was before Jesus, and there was promises, like they knew something was coming, they knew that it was gonna be okay, but
Yeah.
we're living in, that's already happened now, so we should be even more okay with death.
They probably didn't know that they would go to the right hand of the bosom of Abraham. Probably didn't know that, but they knew that there was life after that, and they seem to have embraced it. Moving on to question number 11. How many of the promises of God have come to pass? All of them. Yeah. It says, "Not one word has failed of all the good things the Lord your God has promised concerning you. All things have come to pass for you, not one has failed." We've seen this echo through Joshua, that God promised them and delivered upon this promise through all the verses we've seen in Joshua. In question number 12, we see, what would be the consequence of Israel transgressed against the covenant of God?
Bring upon them all the threats until they were destroyed from off the earth, or from off the land.
Joshua says, just as all the good things that have come to pass, the Lord will bring all the evil things upon them and they transgress them until he is destroyed off this good land. And his, we've seen all his promises that are true until now, that, these people, as Joshua commends them, that you clung on to him until now, and that's a good thing that they've done. But if in the future you disobey him and turn back from his commandments and transgress against his commandments, just as all these good things have happened to you until now, without one thing failing, God has promised to bring all these bad things upon you, and he will destroy you out of this land if you transgress. And we see this going forward, and this is exactly what happens. Every third generation or so, we see that people fall away from the faith. And we see so many revivals and God bringing them back, and people turning back to these idols. And in the end, God gives them up to be captured and taken away to Babylon. This is something that we as Christians must also learn. We might not see retribution as soon as some of these people in the Old Testament might have seen, but we must be sure that God was, showing us patience and love will require us if we transgress his commandments. Any comments? What do you think?
Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people.
Could you say that again?
Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people.
Exactly. And as a nation, they did fall away, and also for us, it's more of a personal thing. We may look at countries and say, "Oh, these people have fallen away," but we must look at us as individuals, and also probably more as congregations rather than nations. That we as a congregation must be faithful and not turn away from what God has given to us. Finally, question 13. What attributes of leadership does Joshua exemplify? What attributes of a leader does Joshua show here? And certainly we have seen that Joshua took this time to give the Pharaoh address.
He had the leadership inside together, all the nation, or the whole group of people together. He went for the officers and the elders and all those folks. He was a communicator, and he told them what to expect. He encouraged them, and he warned them.
Yeah. And exactly, and he definitely took this upon himself. We don't see that God instructed him explicitly to make this or go and talk to the people about this, but he took it upon himself to make sure that he instructs these people last time about all the things that God has done for them. And there's something we also as Christians can learn, that we've seen a lot of people of faith. It's important that the older people train the younger people in faith and encourage them to continue to keep the faith.
He was an encourager. He wasn't negative.
Yeah.
And that's what we should do today. We should encourage the young people. Don't be negative. Don't be mean. Say good things to them. Encourage the good things that they do and build them up. Don't bring them down.
Exactly.
Don't fail to warn either.
Yeah. Should not fail to warn them.
I was just gonna say for the followers, they all came together to listen, but it doesn't seem like they really took it to heart, because, like the first sentence of Judges chapter 1 says, Joshua died and then everything changed. So it's like it was good they came together. It's good that we come together here, but it doesn't mean much if we don't take any of this to heart.
Exactly. You can listen all you can, but if you don't obey, it's just a waste of your time. Well, thank you for all your comments.